the rivalry between Sonoma and Napa Valley, a grape named after sheep, and almost getting kicked out of a vineyard. This week, it's all about wine.
Traveling the world to bring you delicious dishes, tasty beverages, and interesting experiences. This is the Destination Eat Drink Podcast on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
I'm Brent Peterson. Welcome to Destination Eat Drink, the travel podcast for foodies. This is the place where we explore the great cuisine of the world at destinationeatdrink.com, on the YouTube channel, and here at Destination Eat Drink, the podcast. This week, we're talking about wine. But first, if you like the show, be sure to subscribe and review the podcast. It's super easy to do, and thank you very, very much. This week, I thought I'd revisit some of my favorite conversations about wine. You know, I've been doing this show for almost 5 years now, so as I was digging around in the archives, I noticed so many interesting conversations about wine that I thought I'd share some of them again. So if you're new to the show, you might never have heard these before. If you're a longtime listener, you might say to yourself, oh, I remember that one, or maybe I must have missed that one. Anyway, they're all quite entertaining as we explore wine from California, Italy, Spain, and even Bhutan. All right, I'm ready to pop a cork, so let's drink.
Destination Eat Drink.
Sam Coturri comes from California winemaking royalty. His father's the legendary winemaker Phil Coturri, and Sam is carrying on the family tradition at 16600 Winery. Sam talks about the friendly rivalry between Sonoma and Napa Valley, plus he shares some of his favorite wineries. Now, you're in Sonoma Valley, Sam, and of course, Napa Valley is right next door to you. I've always felt that there's kind of maybe a friendly rivalry, a brother rivalry in Sonoma and Napa. You're living it on a day-to-day basis. How do you see it between Sonoma and Napa?
I think that sometimes the rivalry element of it can get a little overblown, and especially I think in Napa, they don't necessarily think of Sonoma as rivals as much as Sonoma thinks Napa as rivals, which can be frustrating too. But I think friendly is probably the best way to describe it. At the end of the day, people who come here or people who seek out our wines wherever they are, they're looking for Napa wines and Sonoma wines with sort of the same level of sort of in the same category in their minds. They're looking for Napa and Sonoma wine. So I think that we joke about it a lot. Sometimes I joke that I can only get my passport stamp going into Napa County so many times a year, so I can't get over that often. But it's definitely something that we talk about, but I think more the consumers and the visitors don't necessarily differentiate between a day spent in Napa Valley and a day spent in Sonoma Valley, except for they probably spent a little less money when they were in Sonoma.
Yeah, that's for sure. When it comes to Napa and Sonoma, they're two different regions. They're two different wine regions.
Right.
What's the difference between the terroir, and are there grapes that thrive in Napa that don't in Sonoma, and vice versa?
Sort of the interesting thing that's happened with Napa, especially in sort of the last 30 or 40 years, is it's become so Cabernet dominant that I think people can sometimes overlook other great things that it can do. So when people think about Napa, you think about those really just like big, lush, rich Cabernets, and Napa does a great job with that. But it's similar to like Sonoma Valley and Sonoma County, because we have this bay, the influence from the San Francisco Bay and from the ocean to our west, but also still get a lot of sunshine, a lot of warm weather. You can find little sort of niche microclimates all over the place that are going to do well with a bunch of different varieties. So that's kind of one of the cool things about Sonoma, especially, is you can spend a day in Sonoma and go to 3 or 4 different wineries and taste 12 or 15 or 25 different varieties, both red wine, white wine, rosé. So, that's the one thing about it. It's sort of hard to define exactly, what does the best here, because it can be so variable. But I love personally some of the heritage varieties like Zinfandel and then the Rhone varieties like Grenache and Mourvedre and Syrah. That I think in both Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley, you can find really good sort of niche little places for those varieties.
So let's talk about some of those places. I won't ask you, Sam, what your favorite wineries are, because that's not fair, but tell us maybe a couple of places that you like, especially that you find are interesting or doing cool things in Sonoma or even Napa, if you like.
For me, and maybe this is just because of I grew up in the mountains, I always seek the mountain vineyard sites. So that's kind of the first place I look is the mountain range that separates Sonoma Valley and Napa Valley, is the Mayacamas Mountains. And on the Sonoma side, we call it the Moon Mountain District. It's a little sub-appellation. On the Napa side, it's called the Mount Veeder appellation. And those are the places I sort of hone in on. One of the great legacy brands is Mayacamas, which just got another top 5 Wine Spectator Wine of the Year. And that's a place that we farm. So and that's kind of how I zero in on things. You find the appellations that you like, and then I look for really good farming practices. So that's kind of how I approach it. And I try not to only be biased towards places that we farm for, but I'm pretty biased towards places that we farm for.
Katie Quinn is an author, podcaster, and YouTuber who is an expert on Italian food. I talk with her about one of my favorite wines from Puglia, Italy, called Primitivo.
Primitivo is an example of the native grapes of Italy, of which there are a record-shattering number of indigenous grape varieties to this country. It's incredible. I'm blanking on the exact number, but it's something like over 3,000 indigenous grape varieties. And so if you're like, well, what's a grape variety? Like Merlot. Merlot is a grape, and it's also the name of a wine made from that grape, or sometimes a mix. But it is a variety of grape. So Primitivo is a grape from Italy, from the southern Italian regions. Puglia is especially known for it. And Primitivo wine is then made from those grapes, from Primitivo grapes. It makes a red wine, a rosso, and it is a bold, powerful, definitely like fruity notes, and sometimes just depending on how it's fermented, depending on so many factors of how the wine itself is made, it can bring on these other notes and nuances and subtleties. But for the most part, it is going to be a bold, tannin forward, but kind of like dark fruits. Think like notes of blackberries, black cherries, maybe a little bit of spice in there. Again, it's all depending on how it's fermented, how it's aged, what it's aged in, all of those things. But it's a bold wine. I love that you love such a bold wine, Brent.
It's really good. I think of it as also rustic. Now we're overgeneralizing when we talk about a huge grape variety, a huge range of wines like Primitivo, but in general, rustic. And also, I remember going to a winery, I can't remember, maybe it was Candido, and they showed us how Puglia is on a ledge of limestone and how the roots go down into the limestone to find the water base. And this imparts, because it's on that limestone base, it imparts a minerality to the wine that I love tasting that when I have the wine. You could almost call it a saltiness, almost a saline, but I think that does it a disservice, because you think salt and wine, you're like, oh, that would be bad. But there is a minerality, I think, to some Primitivos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally. Also, a fun fact about Primitivo is that it's like the same variety as Zinfandel.
Yes.
Just a different name for the same grape.
You got to be careful, though. I said that to a winemaker in Puglia once, and I thought I was going to get kicked off the vineyard.
Why?
He just didn't want to hear it. Because I think Zinfandel is associated with American and, Primitivo is associated with Italian. I don't know why exactly, but he wasn't thrilled. And the other
There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of pride associated with the items from this area.
Yeah, as there should be. Paula Morenza is a foodie tour guide for Culinary Backstreets in Barcelona. She talks about the local sparkling wine called Cava.
Well, wine in Barcelona province, it has a very large tradition. First, I should say that in Spain, we have a lot of different regions, not only the origin destination areas. Farther than the origin destination areas, we have a lot of wine from the earth. And at the end of the day, Spain is one of the countries with the larger wine production in the world, together with France and Italy. And only in Catalonia, we have 11 origin destination areas for wine production. No? Cava, in fact, the sparkling wine, is the most famous Catalan wine. But the origin destination is bigger than Catalonia. That's why now they want to create another more specific destinations to narrow a little bit more the origin of Cava when it is actually a Catalan one. And in this direction, the center of the Cava production, it is Penedès area. So the larger wine production in Catalonia, it is around Penedès area. In Penedès is produced then 95%, more or less, 95% of all sparkling wine in Spain. Normally the cava that is made here, the sparkling wine, is made from 3 main grapes, Xarel·lo, Perelada and Macabeu. And the white wines that they are also producing in the area normally came from the same grapes, no? That they are the ones that give the personality, plus another ones that they are being recovered during the last years, like the white Grenache, la Garnacha Blanca. We mentioned the white Grenache for whites, and for reds, the most traditional variety is no doubt also the Grenache, no? La Garnacha. Garnacha is the main grape for red wine production in Catalonia. Normally it's combined with other varieties like Cariñena, or could be also some Cabernet Sauvignon, a little bit of Merlot. Sometimes they combine it to make a coupage with other possible varieties. A little bit of Shiraz, for example, you are going to find also a lot. But Grenache and Cariñena are the 2 varieties with longer roots in Catalonia. Not only in Barcelona province with all the area of Penedès, but also another area that we should mention is Tarragona and Priorat and Montseny, and also areas a little bit more inland like Terra Alta, no? So there are a lot of production areas. Priorat, probably, this is in Tarragona, is in the context of the Spanish wine, is the other origin destination together with Rioja that produce that is a qualified origin destination. So that they have wines with a higher constant quality. The wines from Priorat, they are made normally with Garnacha and Cariñena, but the peculiarity is the earth, no? They are produced in an area with a lot of slate, what creates this very poor land, where the water filtrates very easily and go to the deep of the earth. And in this area you can get wines with a fantastic minerality, no? So they are very different from other wines because of this mineral flavor that give freshness to the wine, and it is very well balanced and combined with all the fruit that we have from the Grenache. And normally in the wines from that area, we have also an interesting touch from the sea, from the Mediterranean, and the forest. So a good Catalan red wine normally could have all this environment around, no? The influence from the Mediterranean, the freshness from the minerals in the earth, and a little bit of this forest, this Catalan forest that is mostly made of pines and bushes.
Michael Juergens didn't even know where Bhutan was when he planned a visit to run a marathon there. Shortly thereafter, though, he found himself planting a vineyard and starting the country's first winery. You mentioned the terroir, Michael, and I wanted to ask you about that specifically because when I think of Bhutan, I immediately think of the Himalayas. I think of steep, passages and an unforgiving climate. Why am I wrong about thinking that way, and what makes the terroir so good for growing grapes?
Well, so the steep slopes, you're not super wrong about. I don't know if you can see the background on my screen here. This is actually our Yusupong vineyard. Yeah, that's the Yusupong vineyard, and this one's at about 9,000 feet in elevation, and there's a lot of steep slopes in there. But steep slopes are good for grapes. The Mosel in Germany grows amazing Riesling, and some of those slopes are up to 60 degrees, steep. They look like cliffs. Portugal and the Douro Valley.
Yes.
You can just, even in Napa on the mountain slopes, on the Mayacamas, they get pretty steep too. So steep slopes are good for wine grapes in a lot of ways. There certainly are some cooler, more to your point, unforgiving spots within Bhutan. That's kind of the northern side of the country. Most of their current agricultural production is either in the south, where it's tropical and they grow a lot of like citrus fruit and so on and so forth. And then in the middle of the country, where they grow a lot of vegetables and cereal grains. And some of these are the best in the world. I mean, Bhutan makes the best red rice in the world. They make the best cardamom in the world. Wow. And so for me, it was like, I'm looking at this going, wow, look at these mandarin oranges. These are amazing. And I was eating them going, these are spectacular. If I can grow an orange, I sure as hell can grow a wine grape.
Right. So how did you decide what grape varietals you were going to plant?
Well, so I thought about it in two ways. So one way of thinking about it is, what historically grows well there? Well, we don't have any of that data. So
there's no information. Yeah, zero.
The second thing would be, let's do some detailed soil analysis and climate analysis and try to nail in on exactly scientifically which one is the best. However, we don't have a lot of data because they don't have weather stations out in the middle of places like you see on my background. So I didn't have that either. And so then there's what can I sell? And if I think there's a lot of curiosity about Bhutan, certainly within the fine wine industry. The average Joe consumer doesn't probably know what Bhutan is. Probably thinks it's an island in Indonesia.
Right.
So, if you were to sell like a chocolina from Bhutan, that's pretty weird. But a Cabernet, like if you have a curious Cabernet drinker, they would look at it and go, oh, Cabernet, Bhutan, that sounds interesting. I'll try that. So we ended up picking 8 international varietals, which were on the reds. It was Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Syrah. And then on the whites, we did Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. And then I also picked Petit Mansang. And Petit Mansang is very rain tolerant. And Bhutan gets some monsoon pressure in the summer. So that was sort of my hedge. The last round of vineyards we just planted last month, I added in Riesling because of the climate. I added Tempranillo, Sangiovese, and I added Chenin Blanc. So we've got 13 different things growing there. I don't anticipate that all of those are going to work, and that's fine. I just need to find, the 2 or 3 that work the best in these certain spots.
Peter Austin and Sammy Dunham are Brits who make their homes in Abruzzo, Italy. They talk about the delicious wines of this underappreciated region.
I would always take the Masciarelli if I have a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. It's a good solid red, and it's always tastes great in Italy. Not sure if it travels well, because I don't really see it on the shelves in the UK, although we're seeing more Abruzzo wines in UK now. But yeah, there's lots of good ones. I like the Pietrantoni. That's a good one. I guess like it's no surprise, is it? But when you're in the supermarket in Italy, there's a lot of Montepulcianos on the shelf. But the price range is dramatic as well. So you get extremely cheap ones. And I don't know about you, Sammy, but I always have to buy the cheapest one because I want to see how bad it is. And it's never really bad. It's always drinkable, really. And, you're getting some stuff, really low end stuff, €3 a bottle maybe or something.
It's been eye-opening to me, Peter, moving to Portugal. We live in a wine region that's well-known in Portugal. It's becoming more well-known internationally. But going into the grocery store and seeing a bottle of wine for €1.99, and I look at it, I'm like, this, how good could well, let's take it home as a joke, And then we open and we're like, man, this is actually not only pretty good, it's really good. I can't believe it.
Yeah, you do wonder, don't you? Like sometimes if I see it in an unusual container as well, like it's in the same container as the milk or something, I think I'll try that. Right. But yeah, it's always okay, isn't it?
My friends here in Portugal tell me, yeah, you can get the boxed wine. It's really good. And we think boxed wine. Are you kidding? That's for old ladies. But the boxed wine, all of it is really, really good from our local region here. Sammy, what kind of wines do you enjoy drinking in Abruzzo?
I like Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, just like Pete. I probably drink lots of what's even bulk Montepulciano d'Abruzzo if I'm going to an agriturismo. And it's just, they're going to buy just like local wine in bulk, and it's always very good. It surprises me as sometimes it's served chilled, which is quite interesting.
Okay.
I think it's really, I like Media Pepe, and some of Familia Febra, for example. So they don't use industrial yeast in their wine. So everything is natural yeast from the air. And it's really interesting, the results that they're creating with their wines, the difference in taste and how you feel after you've been drinking it as well.
Yes.
That's huge, I think. I love Pecorino, which is very trendy at the moment.
When you say Pecorino, I immediately think of cheese. Is this a grape or is this a kind of wine?
This is a grape.
Okay.
It's a grape, and it was named. It's a very old grape that sort of like lost its appeal. It's named after supposedly sheep eating those grapes. They particularly like these grapes because they were quite sweet. So yeah, that's how it's got its name, but it's a very ancient grape. It lost its popularity and now it's come back into vogue. A Spumante Pecorino is fantastic. It's a real alternative to Prosecco. So if you're looking for something fizzy, that's fantastic. Cerasuolo as well, which is a rosé of the region. They sort of just dip the grapes in some white wine and then drag them out, is superb and is winning so many rosé awards all over the world. It's incredible. It's definitely another one to look out for. There's lots of ancient ones that are coming back at the moment, which is interesting. It's a really diverse market. So, it's encouraging at the moment.
I love when the winemakers and the vineyards bring back some of the old, almost extinct grape varietals, because not only is it nice that they're saving some of these varieties, but also it's great for us as wine drinkers to get to try something that, people might not have had for 50 or 100 years.
Exactly. No, it's fantastic. And you never know what might happen to one grape variety. Something may, eat it and destroy it. So we need to need to be as diverse as possible at the moment, I think.
Okay, there you go. As I was putting the show together, I thought I've had so many great conversations about wine over the years, and sometimes it's about well-known wine regions like Sonoma and Napa Valley, but when was the last time you actually picked up a bottle from Abruzzo, or Puglia for that matter, and surely never from Bhutan? That was a lot of fun revisiting those. If you want to hear the full conversations or follow any of my guests, you can get links in the show notes at radiomisfits.com/DED244. Well, that's it for this week. Next week, we're talking about national dishes from around the world with foodie author Anja van Bremzen. Don't miss that. I've also got lots of foodie content at destinationeatdrink.com. I just posted a story, in fact, about a garden in Braga, Portugal, with an unusual foodie link. Get that at destinationeatdrink.com/blog. I also posted a video on the YouTube channel about a cool day trip from Porto. Get that by clicking on the video tab at destinationeatdrink.com, or go to YouTube and you can check out the channel at Destination Eat Drink 946. Destination Eat Drink is distributed by the Radio Misfits Podcast Network and a guy who wants to start a Scotch distillery in Bhutan, Ed Silla. Thanks, Ed. I'm Brent Peterson. I'll see you down the road.
Join us next week for another culinary adventure on Destination Eat Drink, a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.